Well, welcome to the 29th Wandsworth Business Forum, the opportunity for businesses to have your say. I'm Steve Pinto, as most of you know, and today we'll be having an update from Steve Diamond, Head of the Economic Development Office at Wandsworth Council. Councillor Aled Richards-Jones, who normally attends, is running another meeting and sends his apologies. And today also we have a slightly different approach. We've asked some of our top businesses in Wandsworth just to give you an insight into how they're coping with COVID, what their response has been, what the impact has been, and how they're working towards recovery. So enough from me. I'd like to ask Steve Diamond from the Economic Development Office to unmute himself and just tell us about what's happening in Wandsworth. Steve, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Steve, and good morning to everyone. So just as Steve said at the beginning, I'm covering the normal presentation from Chancellor Aled Jones, who sends his apologies. I think to some extent, the update from the council is kind of what you're all hearing as well. We're absorbing a lot of the information that's come from government and some key government announcements, obviously in recent days. Just to sort of stand back a bit and look at the change that's happening, we obviously still had some important announcements dating back to the Rule of Six announcements from the Prime Minister and the regulations that came in there. And I know they've had quite a big impact on a lot of businesses. So we've been looking to make sure we can update the information on our website, that members of my team that are out and about are helping businesses to understand how that's being applied. Obviously, putting in the QR code for the app and generally raising awareness of some of these new requirements which have legal obligations behind them. And it's very much working with colleagues in regulatory services partnership to get that engagement and awareness up so that we can avoid any need for enforcement. There were some pretty important announcements as well regarding some extensions of bounce back loan deadlines, some of the tax deferral, obviously obligations on commercial landlords that have been extended as well. So some fairly meaningful announcements there, and that's going to be important for businesses planning ahead. I suppose the key one that's coming up is the formal end of the job retention scheme, the furlough scheme at the end of the month, and its replacement by the new job support scheme, which is will have a different requirement, is less generous, but may well be an important scheme for businesses to consider. Like the rest of you, we are waiting for details of how that will work and how you will apply for it, but they should be coming through soon, and we'll of course get details of that on our web pages as soon as we can. We've all seen what's happening in the rest of the country with local lockdown measures for different parts, and again, there have been announcements from the Treasury about business support for areas that are in particular lockdown circumstances, in particular grant schemes. And then on Friday, the Chancellor announced a sort of enhanced version of the job support scheme that will now be applied in Tier 3. We've seen that this is now being framed around the new tiers that were announced on Monday. So I'm sure all of this is probably common knowledge to you. I think the key thing is how it's going to work in practice. London is currently in Tier 1. There's been a fair amount of chatter, and the Mayor has been fairly vocal about the likelihood of moving to Tier 2 quite soon. I think from an economic development and business point of view, the impact may not be too great in that the Tier 2 measures are focused around household mixing, but nonetheless that will start to bear bear on businesses and workplaces too. So we'll be looking at what kind of support and advice we can get out to businesses. Clearly, the important big picture side of this is that we, as Shannon Cotillo, our Director of Public Health, told the forum last week, we are essentially in the second wave now. The extent and the severity of that second wave is somewhat unknown. And the important thing is to try and make sure that we can get through it with as minimal impacts on both public health and business as we can. So we're really trying to get geared up for all circumstances, what we can do to help the borough and help the businesses get through that, thinking about how adaptable we could be. I think that adaptability is obviously the key message about today, and I think it's great that we're going to hear from some businesses about their plans for that and how they intend to get through this. The council will do what it can to make sure we get the information out and support businesses through this. These forums are also part of our effort to listen and understand what's going on as well. We want to be informed by your experiences and your concerns too. So I will be listening to the rest of the meeting with great interest from both the speakers and the panel. So I think that's it from me, Steve. I'll hand over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. I'd now like to introduce Reggie Blennerhassett, who's the Pro-Vice Chancellor at the University of Roehampton. And as most of you know, all of our speakers are patron members of the Chamber. And with Roehampton University, we've had numerous events there. It is a fantastic university. They've made a huge investment in infrastructure over the years leading up to this pandemic, and it'll be very interesting to see how they're coping with COVID. Reggie, over to you.
Thanks very much, Steve. I'll just share my screen. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Great. So I was just going to really talk through about how we've been dealing with the pandemic since the lockdown back in March. And the university actually went remote about a week before the government lockdown, so we had prepared for remote teaching in advance because we could see the announcement was coming. So we wanted to make sure that we had tested it and we're up and running for lockdown. So we've actually been spent the whole of the summer remote teaching, but we are now back on campus, and I'll take you through that. And I'll just get my screen. So again, the government has made various announcements over recent months, and of course the most recent announcement is a commitment to keep schools, colleges and universities open. So we will remain open. But actually those new announcements haven't altered what our approach has been right through the pandemic so far, and in our planning for the start of term this year. And key to that has been prioritising the safety and well-being of our staff. As I say, following government guidance has been key to that. Following the principles of working safely, and again, those are principles that have been agreed nationally by the higher education sector and the recognised trade unions in the sector. But also being supportive and flexible and understanding to the needs of our staff, particularly those with particular personal circumstances where they may have caring responsibilities or they may have underlying health conditions, which means they're not able to come onto campus. So we've implemented a blended learning approach for this academic year. So that means that some of our activity is on campus, and I'll come to that in a moment, but also a significant proportion of that remains remote online. But the key behind that is that if students and staff are unable to attend campus, they can do all of their learning online. That's been a really important part of that. So the guiding principles for us, and we agreed these right back at the beginning as we were putting in our planning in place. And it's taken us many months to do all of that planning and make sure that we were ready for a return to some sort of operations. But again, follow the government guidelines, safe environment for everybody who might be on campus. But also when we welcomed our students back for this term, and we did that in a staggered way, when particularly our resident students were in accommodation. Normally we would have one big move-in Sunday and all our students would arrive, and there'd be hundreds of students, thousands of students or trying to get into their accommodation. We staggered that over a number of weeks so that we were able to manage that return to campus, but also to ensure that our international students who joined us were able to quarantine for the 2 weeks, the required 14 days in accommodation with us. But again, I think the last point is key, that the idea that we need to remain flexible, because we, like everybody I'm sure on this call, just doesn't know what's going to happen next. In terms of the next government announcement, whether we do go into a full lockdown, over half term, whatever that might be, we need to be ready for that, so that we can keep operating in whatever way we can. So I'm just going to go through some of the safety measures that we agreed, and hopefully these are useful for other people too, just in terms of the kind of things that you might have done or be considering doing as you move forward. But one of the things that we agreed early on was that face coverings would be mandatory in all shared indoor spaces. And we agreed this long before government guidelines on face masks, face coverings came out. We felt that was something we needed to do. The evidence was there that it was something that we should do. And again, one of our underlying principles has been simple messaging, keeping it simple so that people understand what they need to do. We've carried out risk assessments on all of our buildings. We have a range of buildings. They have different functions, but it was key that each building and learning facility had a risk assessment so people understood how to operate in that environment. Key to that, of course, was ventilation. If you're going to have people in a space for an extended period of time, you need to make sure that the ventilation that you have there operates in accordance with government guidelines. And if it doesn't, then we wouldn't use those rooms where ventilation wasn't at the right standard. And again, we've prepared all our teaching and social spaces. So we've observed social distancing with all of our teaching spaces. Again, in our social spaces, we have one-way systems across the university in terms of entering and exiting buildings and moving around the institution. As I said, students can study remotely if they wish to. We have a number of international students who joined us, enrolled with the university, but are going to remain in their country and study online for the first term, and then hopefully join us in January. Again, the amount of teaching we're doing on campus is reduced. It's drastically reduced because of the need to observe social distancing in the teaching spaces. So the number of students we can actually get into a room is 30% of what we would normally be able to get in to manage that. So we've got, we have timetabled it so that all students have the opportunity to have some face-to-face teaching. But as I say, it is limited. The other thing we've done is that we've devised a shared statement of responsibility, and all students, whether they're living on campus or living at home, have to sign up to this shared statement of responsibility. It forms part of their contract with the university for this year. And again, we've worked with the Students' Union to develop that. But again, it is very much about emphasizing that shared responsibility that everybody has to ensure the safety of themselves and of everybody around them. And that's been key to, I think, to our success so far. And I say that while I'm touching wood, because this is a moving circumstance, which we think we've got control of at the moment, but who knows what happens next. And again, we've given students training. So before they arrive, they've got to have training about about coronavirus and the safety measures that are in place. We've enhanced the cleaning regime around the university. So between when the teaching rooms there's a change in the student group, the rooms are then cleaned between one group leaving and another group arriving. Anywhere you go around the university at the moment, you will see our cleaning teams cleaning the spaces, making sure that all surfaces are wiped. It constitutes as a constant team of cleaners doing that. And also there are cleaning materials for people to use. So wherever you happen to be in your office or in a room, you have access to cleaning materials as well. And as I said, we have created a whole access system with maps and signposting around the campus, so people know where they're which direction they're supposed to go in, and it's sort of to create that one-way system. We have a lot of very fine buildings at the university. Some of them are quite listed buildings, some quite old buildings, which always present a challenge when you're trying to devise one-way systems. But we have been able to do that. Going to the toilet in my building is quite interesting. I have to go down the stairs, go to the loo, and then I have to go out of the building, go right around the building, come back in the front door. So you get some fresh air. Again, we've put in screens and sanitation points across the university. So wherever there's a reception desk, people are behind a perspex screen. When lecturers are teaching in classrooms, they have a movable screen, a screen that's on wheels, so they can move it around. So they can move around the room, but they remain behind a screen at all times while they're teaching. And again, we've reopened our library. Unfortunately, it's a new building and it lends itself very well to social distancing. But for example, when people return books, they're quarantined for 72 hours before they're put back on the shelf. And again, just looking after staff and students' well-being, and we've been promoting our employee assistance program and the mental health first aid training, so that we're making sure that everybody's being looked after, not just physically, but mentally as well. I think that's a key part of this, because of the impact the virus has on people's mental health is not to be underestimated. The other thing we did was we had an independent review of the measures that we put in place to manage the pandemic, and also to make sure that we had a safe environment. And we had an audit of that, which was carried out by NQA. And that was a significant piece of work where they come and visit the campus and they meet everybody involved in preparing the campus safely. And I'm pleased to say that we passed that with very minor recommendations, which I think were just to ensure that we had more hand sanitation around the campus. But apart from that, we passed it. But it was a very comprehensive audit. They visited all of the colleges, and they also visited the library and catering areas, which are managed externally. Our catering and our cleaning are both contracted out services, so they engaged with both of those contractors to make sure that they were following the guidance too. But crucially, they also visited our student accommodation to make sure that we had that set up, so that the way that we were managing students living in accommodation, because they become a household when they're in a flat, they become effectively a household, so making sure that we had that management in place. So how's it going? Well, so far, we've had a very small number of positive tests amongst staff and the staff and student bodies, less than 20 on the university. We have a number of students who are, as a precautionary measure, we have put into isolation because they either are living with somebody who's tested positive or they've had some contact. But we have gone beyond the public health guidance on that. And we've actually put in a more cautious approach. So we've asked people to isolate, even though they're not necessarily required to do so. We feel that in terms of controlling the outbreak, if we do that, if we do that quickly, then we've got a much better chance of not getting into a situation like some of the universities you've seen in the national press, where they've had some horrendous numbers of students testing positive, but also isolating. Testing remains the biggest issue for us. So, and I know last week this was raised in the forum as well. You know, there isn't a testing centre close to the university that people can easily get to. The nearest one is in Acton. It's an hour's walk away. We don't want our students or staff using public transport to go to a test centre. That just doesn't make any sense. So we're working very closely with Shannon, Director of Public Health, but also the Department of Health and Social Care, to get two things. One, to get a local walk-in testing centre, close to the campus. We need one in Wandsworth, I think, much closer than we do at the moment. But also looking at home testing kits and getting access to home testing kits, because again, that would be something which would be really useful where we have students who are in isolation, so we can get them tested. If that comes back negative, get them back out of isolation quickly. Guidelines remain challenging. Again, I'm sure that's the same for everybody, what the uncertainty of what happens next, and actually trying to plan for us, it's a complex organization, there's a lot of planning involved. And I'm sure for all of you, it's exactly the same thing and very frustrating in terms of trying to plan ahead, not knowing what you're going to be asked to do next as a business. So you do spend a lot of time second guessing government. I think it's the one ray of light is that central government is now working much more closely with local government, and I hope that's maybe we can get some feedback on that, but that is obviously a very sensible approach from them. There's limited activities for students. Most of it's online. There isn't the social activities that students would normally engage with at when they come to university for the first time. But we are doing our best to keep them engaged and work with them in their households so that they're not mixing outside of those households. But on the positive side, I think that staff and students are happy to be back on campus. It's there's a real atmosphere. People are being very well behaved. They really are observing the rules. That's one thing I must say is fantastic to see. But I'm on campus today, and it's just really nice to see to be able to be here and to see the students back. I mean, as I said before, international students are still enrolling, but a lot of them are deciding to study online at home for the first time. And finally, the take-home message from this is communicate, communicate, and communicate again, and keep communicating. Just always, always, always getting the message out to your customers. For us, it's our staff and our students and our people we work with. Just keep repeating the message, keep reminding people what they need to do, how they need to stay safe, how they need to behave to make sure that other people are safe as well. So that I can't overemphasize that enough. It's just the biggest thing. So I'll stop there, but I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Reggie. If you can unshare the screen,
There we go.
that would be great. So University of Roehampton is one of the larger organisations in the borough, and we kind of expect you to put the resource in to develop those strategies. And I thought it was really well put together. Abide by the government guidelines, whether you think they're right or wrong. If we all just guide by it rather than inventing our own guidelines, it's the safest route. Maintaining safety, a safe environment, absolutely crucial. And I love the way that you do the training as well and map out all the procedures. I love the allowing normality so that people can enjoy themselves as well, because experience is a great part of life, and especially for students. And being flexible to allow you to adapt, absolutely crucial. But I suppose I didn't know about the NQA, where you've got audited for the coronavirus guidelines, which was excellent. I didn't know about that. That's new information for me. But I suppose what I'd ask you is, have you any sort of tips for the smaller businesses, but perhaps who don't have that resource? Just any helpful advice that you could perhaps think of on that?
Well, it's something which maybe it's something we could work together on as a chamber, so that in terms of if people wanted to had some questions about the kind of setup they were putting in place about making their environment safe, that we could set up some sort of a chat or something like that, where people could bounce ideas off each other and say, look, this is what I'm thinking of doing to make my space safe. What do you think? Does this comply? And I think we'd be very happy to support people in that as well, because obviously we've been through a massive exercise with a huge range of space. So we've got And what we've done is we've got a risk assessment for every space that we have, so that there may be some similarities. We could share that with people if people wanted to do that. So we're very happy to.
That would be yeah, excellent. If any business is interested, I'll be more than happy to facilitate that. And I guess, but just applying by the guiding principles that you have outlined, and maybe doing it on a smaller scale equally works as well. So thank you very much for that, Reggie. We'll take questions at the end.
Okay.
You can use the chat box put some questions in just to remind us, and we'll come back to them. But also use it to introduce your business, put any offers up, or just leave your contact details. So please use the chat box. I'd now like to ask Martin Herbert to unmute himself and talk to us. Martin is the Managing Director of the Banham Security Group. Most people, it's a national brand. It's truly well respected. And they're probably in a fortunate position of being able to cope through this situation as well, but it would be nice to get the insights from Martin. The Banham Group have been patron members of the Chamber since they moved to Earlsfield. I think it was back in 2015, and most of you will have seen Martin at some point at the Earlsfield Business Network events that we had when it was possible. So with that, Martin, I'd like to ask you just to give us an insight into what's happening with the Banham Group.
Good morning. Thank you, Steve. Sadly not national. I wish we'll aspire to that one. But London and South East. I'm sorry not to be meeting you all face to face, but it is good to see you virtually. When Steve asked me to speak today, he asked me to talk about the difficulties and obstacles that we faced during the pandemic and how we have overcome them. When the world changed for us all in March, like many businesses, we had to work out how we could turn an organization that had so far operated with only the most minimal of flexible working arrangements to a predominantly work from home business. I could speak about the difficulties we had to overcome to achieve this, but I know that this is not unique to us. And so it'll be a fairly familiar tale. Instead, I'm going to focus on how we kept our road staff going by changing how we operate to continue to support our customers and keep them safe at home. In March, this felt like a particularly daunting challenge, especially as the mission of our business has always been to keep people safe. Over 9 decades, Banham has been built on providing peace of mind to our customers, and that we're always there to protect them. So in March, we had to ask ourselves how we would retain the personal service that we are known for, whilst removing those face-to-face interactions. That service is most valued in an emergency, so we quickly realized that the emergency service areas of our business needed to be protected above all else. That involved making sure our alarm control center was manned 24/7, that our key guards were able to dispatch as normal in response to alarm activations and lockouts, and that our service engineers were able to respond to customers' distress calls. Even in pandemic, and with everyone staying at home, people still get locked out, still lose their keys, and still have their security compromised. All these departments had to operate with new robust safety measures, safety procedures, and with quickly sourced PPE. At the same time, we used technology to support customers with non-emergency security requirements as best we could. Our sales team got around not being able to visit a property by carrying out surveys virtually or quoting for systems from plans. It was a compromise to our normal face-to-face sales methods, but amazingly, many customers did still place orders for new systems at the height of lockdown, even though we couldn't possibly give them a fitting date. We were able to continue to carry out routine checks of alarm systems by using our technology to conduct system health checks remotely. And we even maintained our key cutting service while our showrooms were closed. By carrying out pre-registration checks remotely and taking orders and payments in advance, we offered contactless key cutting service by appointment at our Earlsfield HQ. With most locksmiths and hardware stores closed, this provided a vital service for the local community, particularly NHS workers who we supplied with free keys as a small gesture of our appreciation for the work that they had done and continue to do to keep us safe. During this initial period, we had to constantly adapt, working through the early stages of the pandemic, put additional stress on those staff working on the front line. Quite rightly, we had to earn their confidence for the safety measures that we were putting in place. We always supported them to walk away from a situation that they were not comfortable with. And there were quite a few of those. We sought feedback from our teams on the road, asked our customers what they thought, and amended and strengthened our measures accordingly. This consultative approach with our staff has continued throughout the pandemic, and I'm sure it will continue even after it has gone. We are taking the same approach towards our office return plan as well, trialing safety measures and taking suggestions from those who must work in the office in preparation for the wider return of our staff in the future. Our emergency teams were our trailblazers, and they've helped us build the new ways of working, which our whole business now operates under. Therefore, when it came to bringing our non-emergency teams back into customers' properties, we already had a tried and tested blueprint of how to work safely. Our original teams acted as employee advocates who could reassure their returning colleagues that we were committed to keeping them safe. And by this time, we had sourced the levels of PPE required to let our full workforce get back on the road. If our emergency workforce had not been out there throughout, I do not believe we would have been able to plan, respond and bounce back so quickly once restrictions were lifted. When we were planning the return of our wider on-the-road staff, as you can imagine, one of the major obstacles was sourcing adequate PPE and safety equipment. It seems ridiculous to me now, but as we planned the staged return of our engineers to go back out on the road, our plans were not based on sophisticated models or predictions of customer demand, but were more closely aligned with our PPE stock levels. Fortunately, we were able to source PPE from companies local to Banham to help us source the huge number of protective masks, sanitizers and cleaning materials we required and still do. And also displayways, who are based across the road from our head office in Earlsfield, supplied perspex and extra safety equipment to help protect our teams working in our head office and all our showrooms. We expect our spend on PPE to be in excess of £350,000 this year alone. I'm happy to say that all our people have been back out on the road for many months now, and we're all supporting customers again. And I do believe we have overcome the challenge of whether we could still offer a personal service in a pandemic. Our business's reliance on personal service may have seemed like our biggest challenge, but it is also our greatest strength. The pandemic has, without doubt, been one of the toughest challenges Banham has ever faced. Thanks to the incredible hard work of every Banham employee, we're coming through the other side. There is demand for our products from new customers. Our existing clients still seem to value our service, and our people want to stay part of the Banham family. This has been completely unpredictable. I could never have imagined in March that we would be where we are now, and we are certainly not complacent or counting our chickens that our good fortune continues without constant hard work and adjustment. But for now, I feel incredibly proud of what our team has achieved. Like every business, we look to the future and the next few months with some uncertainty and trepidation. Whatever the pandemic throws at us next, we must continue to learn and adapt. The last 7 months has taught us that executing flexibility is more valuable than executing a fixed plan, and that communicating and consulting with both our customers and our people is vital to maintain loyalty and commitment throughout the challenges of a pandemic, and rather like Reggie has said just before me. But also, we must not forget that whilst doing things in a new way, it is vital to keep going. We can get through this extremely difficult period and succeed if we remember to stay true to our values as well. Thank you very much, Steve. That's it.
Thank you very much, Martin. That was very helpful to understand. Again, similar themes coming through about, being flexible really, but the main one is communicating with customers especially, but also looking after staff and encouraging staff to walk away is a huge thing, especially in a sales environment. So congratulations on that approach. I suppose one question I'd like to ask you at this time is, a company like Bannon's must rely on marketing. Have you changed the way you market? Is it more digital now, or have you changed the focus at all, or pretty much the same?
Well, one thing that we did have to do at the beginning was when I made reference to the virtual surveys, we marketed that point because, and actually that was hugely successful. So when customers came onto our website, they could see straight away that we could carry on operating virtually rather than having to attend people's homes, and that made a big difference. And actually, we were really busy in that respect. And as I said, we continued to receive orders for our installations, even though we couldn't do anything about it in respect of offering a fitting date. But otherwise, it was pretty much no other more specific marketing. We've done quite a lot of work on the emergency locksmith side, I guess, but I think virtual surveys was the key thing for us, and that was very successful.
Thank you very much, Martin. I guess the point I'd like to make on that is that for many businesses who are struggling, marketing is key. Just because businesses are struggling doesn't mean that there aren't customers out there. And I guess you just have to communicate to customers that you are still open for business, and there's an avenue into your business as well. So I think that was a great point that you brought there at the end, that you have to let your customers know that you can still trade with them and provide the same sort of service. So thank you very, very much for that. I'd like to now ask Paul Mitchell to tell us about his business, Le Bureau. You'll also know Paul from seeing him at many, many networking events. Paul and Le Bureau have been great patron members of the Chamber. Paul really saw the value in networking and the work we were trying to do. And he's also helped out with quite a lot of projects, I think, with the council, young people, etc. But Paul's business is the co-working space, and that's come under a lot of pressure. Although I have to say that the way things are going, the future looks very rosy for co-working in shared office spaces, because people do need to come out and meet other people. So just really looking forward to hearing Paul's story and how you're coming through this recovery. Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Steve. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Can you see me?
We can.
Yeah, good. Okay, just checking. You know, before I give you the story of Le Bureau over the last 7 or 8 months, let me just share an anecdote which I think demonstrates that so much of what we all face is beyond our experience and our age and all that we might think of as being common sense. My son is a graduate trainee with the Swire Group and is based in Taiwan, and he works in the marketing department of Coca-Cola in Taiwan. Taiwan has a population of 23 million people, and in February, when there was just, you know, some stories about some sort of bugs and bats in Wuhan in China, I was sitting in Donegal looking out at heather and blue sea and thinking, you know, Taiwan, it's close to China. Maybe, you know, maybe it's not such a safe place for this young lad to be. So I said, Connor, do you not think you might be better coming back to London? And, you know, because Taiwan is bound to be a risky proposition, is it not? So here we are 7 or 8 months later. Taiwan, population 23 million. They've had a total of 530 cases of COVID-19 and 7 deaths. Donegal, population 150,000 that's less than the borough of Hammersmith and Fulham, they've had 1,500 cases and 41 deaths. Who could have imagined, or at least who, could this Irishman, London-based, but often in Ireland, could he have imagined that outcome? So past experience and prejudice and whatever is not necessarily a good guide to the situation that we find ourselves in. So look, Le Bureau, who are we? We're a co-working space in Battersea Studios on Silverthorne Road. We've been here for 15 years, so we're pretty long in the tooth in the co-working space. We have 11,000 square feet, largely open plan, but with some private offices. We have 220 desks, and in the good old days, those would have been occupied by about 90 small firms, startups, freelancers, SMEs, many in the tech and design arena, web design, graphic design, 3D imaging, architecture, others in financial services or agencies or building management services, a complete mix. Many of those firms would be sole traders. A few would be teams of maybe as many as 6, and most in the middle. Some of them would have stayed for only a month or so. Others have been with us for years. And the attraction of what we offer is that it's hugely flexible. So there's no lease, there's no deposit, there's no personal guarantees, there are no dilapidations. A person can hot desk for a day, or they can take a monthly stay and a rolling monthly stay. The notice period is 7 days. There's one flat charge per desk, and that covers everything. Free use of meeting rooms, printing, broadband, teas, coffees, shower facilities, the lot. So that a small business knows at the start of the month what they're going to pay and what they're going to get for, there are no hidden extras, no extra charges. And that's very appealing to, that was very appealing to many types of businesses, particularly small businesses. And we wrap around that what was a great atmosphere. It's a lovely place managed by a lively team of three young ladies who've been drawn from the hospitality sector, because that's very largely what we provide. And those 3, just to give you a sense of their enthusiasm for Le Bureau, between them, those 3 people have been with us for 12 years, for more than 12 years. That's not 12 years each, that's between them. But it's quite some tenure, if you think. So that's what we were, and it's what we hope we might be again one day. But what's happened as a result of COVID? Well, back in March, when the government first advised working from home, most of our members, as we call the people that take desks with us, they did just that, and they opted not to renew from April or beyond. And so by the time of Boris's address to the nation on the 23rd of March, on that Monday, we only had 2 or 3 members in the place. And upon hearing the government's message, they too went home. So we closed the office. So our revenues from late March have crashed to 0. We took the decision, as I say, to close at 5:30 on the 24th. And went into what we call hibernation. And I think this is what an awful lot of businesses have done and are still trying to do. Hibernation for us has meant 4 things. 1, conserving all possible cash, maximizing the support that we can get from the state, maintaining relations, stickiness, I call it, with our members, and then protecting the team. All of this so that we can spring back into action in the shortest possible time when it's feasible to do so. To support our members, we let them leave their equipment in situ on desks and in the locked pedestals. We lent them office chairs and other equipment so that they could make working from home as manageable as possible. We've put in a regular newsletter and updates through emails and blogs so that they know what's happening, in addition to taking regular phone calls and emails from them with questions about how are we getting on, how are we managing, how are they managing. There's a good, healthy dialogue between people who respect each other's attempts to survive in these difficult times. Some of our members, I can tell you, went home in tears, mostly at the thought of leaving somewhere that they really enjoyed, but also fear about plunging into the unknown and fearing for their livelihoods. Many companies working in the events sector, in architecture, in graphic design, in structural engineering, those are examples of firms that have been severely impacted. So it's not just that we've had a tough time. Most of our member firms have also had a very tough time. And so we, as I say, we also kept the team primed and ready to go. The 3 team members, we put them on furlough. We maintained and still maintain a weekly WhatsApp team meeting, where the first reason for doing that is to understand how people are. How are we as team members? Are we dealing with living in lockdown as it was, and then the somewhat eased environment? It's fine for me. I'm sitting in a relatively comfortable room here. I have a garden out the back, and I'm close to a lovely park. 2 of the 3 team members have no outside space. 2 of them are single mums. So the challenges of living in lockdown with more cramped accommodation than I enjoy is clearly a significant challenge. So the team meeting is an important part of, maintaining camaraderie, maintaining spirit. And they are great people, and I want to ensure that they're able to stay with the business and be ready, willing, and able to spring back into action when the time allows. So those are 2 of the important things that we've been doing during lockdown. But probably the most challenging has been conserving cash. I mean, that, because our revenues went to 0, didn't mean that our obligations went to 0. And we're a small business. We are, myself and 3 people, our total revenues are around, in normal times, are around $1 million. We don't have deep pockets. We don't have enormous reserves on our balance sheet. So we had to, from the outset, get into important, frank, and transparent conversations with all of those with whom we would normally spend money. And those are landlords, those are suppliers, those are contractors, everyone. And frankly, there was no alternative but to be almost completely open book with people, and to argue that keeping us alive, if in hibernation, was in their best interests as well as in our best interests. And frankly, we've had a great reaction from everyone. Probably the biggest contributor to that has been our landlord, Schroders, and I would just want to name check them as being pragmatic and willing to engage in a way that contrasts with some of the stories that one hears on the high street. And we have to recognize that in us conserving cash, which we've been able to do, that's been great for us, but it's been painful for these other organizations, those that we have deprived of the cash that they would otherwise have earned. So we've been in hibernation, and we were in hibernation so that when restrictions lifted, we could reopen. We reopened on a socially distanced way on the 1st of August, and we did so because a small number of member firms were desperate to get back. And we thought that we might have 10 or 12 desks occupied in August. That's out of, remember, 220, so it's a tiny number. It would obviously be loss-making, but it would give us an opportunity to learn how to operate with COVID. So social distancing measures, hand sanitizing equipment, markings, flow of people through the building, so on and so forth. Learn how to do all of that. And to our surprise, 25 individuals turned up in August, not the 10 to 12, and so we were very pleased with that. That number rose to 41 by the start of September. And that was a mix of former members coming back and some new inquiries, which we're delighted with. And then, of course, Boris announced in mid-September that we should all be working from home again if possible. And so from October, our numbers are back down to 26. And that's a kind of, ugh. But it is what it is. The people in the firms who have come back or have joined, the reasons for them coming back include they need a lot of team interaction. You know, those who are in, their business calls for team members to constantly being in dialogue and whatever, and they feel that that's better physically co-located. There are quite a number who are desperate to get out of cramped shared accommodation. There's also, I think, a number who they want something that makes them feel somewhat normal again in a world that just isn't normal. Is there a dimension to normality that they can grab hold of? So that's where we are at the moment. Sorry, I should just say that the team, we have the team back at the moment. They'll be on furlough till the end of this month. Since the 1st of August, between them, they were working a total of 30 hours per week in the office. So they were taking turns coming into the office, coming in after rush hour and going home before rush hour to try to minimize the risk of using public transport and its consequences. And there was just remarkable enthusiasm on the part of the team to get back and to get into the office and to meet other member firms again, or whatever. And that's been wonderful. It's been quite uplifting, in fact. What lies ahead? Well, we don't know, actually, the same as anyone and everyone else. I mean, working from home has been a big success. I think a much bigger success than most might have anticipated. There's no imminent prospect of a vaccine. There's still justified fear of public transport, particularly at its peak times. Another closure of schools, should it happen, makes life very difficult for working parents to get out of their home. So, you know, the numbers of people wanting to come into office spaces, be they co-working or others, at the moment is pretty muted. That having been said, many firms and individuals are questioning conventional property arrangements with long-term leases, with deposits, fit-outs, dilapidations, etc., etc. And so flexible workspace arrangements may well become more attractive, as Steve was alluding to at the outset. But that doesn't mean to say the picture is rosy for the current owners of property or operators of property. There is a chasm between where we are and the world in which economically attractive volumes of people come into the workplace. The questions for us as operators include, can the future economics be made to work? Social distancing obviously means lower occupancy, like restaurants. Can restaurants operate with 1/3 to 1/2 of its normal customers in, not at existing or conventional levels of rent and rates? Can we survive until things improve? If the future for commercial office space, flexible or conventional, is a long way off, can we survive? Can the property funds, the major landlords, and many of the many smaller landlords hang on in there until these better times emerge? Operators like us, well, we know that The big guys are in difficulty. WeWork had its troubles before COVID. Those have been accelerated. Regis is either having enormous difficulty or trying to strong arm landlords to reduce its rental bill, or probably a mix of both. There are quite a number of independent co-working spaces who have gone out of business. So frankly, we don't know. If this continues, we will only be able to continue by adopting some version of our hibernation with continued support from all of the parties that I mentioned before. We will have that support for as long as we are the best option that the people with whom we would normally do business, consider. If they consider us to be their best option, they will enable us to remain in hibernation. So we'll keep the purse strings very tight. We will support the small number of members who are back in the business, and we'll continue to work very closely and transparently with all of those whose support we require, and we will battle on until such times as we're either through all this or the battle is lost. Who knows? Let's let battle continue. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much, Paul. That was extremely frank, and we all sympathise with a very painful experience that you're going through as a very successful business owner. If anyone's been to Le Bureau, you will know that it's one of the most creative co-working spaces that's out there. I've always been impressed with the way the team run it, the way the team interact with all of your members, and we just hope it gets back to normal soon. I am absolutely sure that the co-working shared office space will take off, simply because, blockchain and AI were predicting that there would be no need for big offices in the future, and that governments would have to start thinking about, what do you do with these buildings, and what do you do when people have more time, and people will need a social wage. So how do you factor that into the economy? And COVID has really just brought all that about much faster, and we've not had the time to plan. But we've had so many inquiries from large offices saying, can we downsize? Do you know anywhere where we can downsize? So I'm sure it will come to people using co-working spaces more and more, but it's a question of surviving until that time comes. And no one knows just how long we're going to have to wait, I guess. But thank you so much for sharing. So that was, I suppose, a total balance to two of the larger organisations of Roehampton University and the Banham Group. This is a chance to ask our speakers questions. Just raise your hand. We've had some nice compliments in from some of our attendees, and one from Jill Squire saying she's just passed you a referral, Paul, for Le Bureau, and she's wishing you luck with that one. So yeah, if anyone's got any questions, just hit the raise your hand button, or wave at me on the screen and I'll unmute you, even if it's to make a comment on our speakers. Please do that. In the meantime, we're going to ask Zaib from Lanop Accountants to give us an update on the latest schemes that have been put out from the government. Zaib, can I hand over to you for now? To you.
Thank you, Steve. And thanks, Paul, for sharing your journey. This actually shows how a business can survive or should be looking to survive in these taxing situations. I would like to share my experience first before jumping into the schemes that are available right now, because I think that can add a positive note or experience. One of our client, a restaurant business, closed down restaurant because of all the right reasons and wrong situation, of course. And then we know a commercial landlord who's lost another restaurant tenant, and they were both struggling. Our client restaurant, who was struggling as well, he'd been home for last 4 months, working on new menus and new way to do the business. And similarly, our commercial landlord had been struggling because he had to make all the payment arrangements. So what we did, we brought them two together, and now they're both going into a joint venture where the landlord will be a stakeholder in this restaurant business. This way, the landlord will gain from his share as well. Basically, he's taking risk. He's giving property to a new tenant, but he will also benefit from this risk. Look, high risk, high reward. This is a very simple business terminology, and this way we believe. I mean, of course, they've got the lawyers involved, and everything needs to be planned out. But this has been a good breakthrough, and I hope everybody who's listening, if they do find themselves in similar situation, or they do have another option, or to as mentioned earlier, communication is the key, and can unlock new opportunities for you. Now I'll jump into the schemes that are available. I will like to mention the new schemes are not as good as they were before. For example, now the job coronavirus CJRS, as we call them, job retention scheme, is coming to closure by 31st of October, and it's been taken over. There's going to be another scheme which is now called job support scheme. This job support scheme is only designed to protect viable jobs. If you remember, coronavirus job retention scheme was designed to save every possible job. The government was going to pay 80%, and then in the last few months 70%. But it was even recommended that if you have fired an employee in February, you should take them back and put them onto the payroll and claim the CJRS for them, the furlough payments. But in this new category or new job scheme, it is only available to the viable jobs, so the jobs that are making contribution, so where the employers do need their employees. So employees need to work 1/3 of the hours, and then the 1/3 of the hours, 1/3 of the salary will be contributed by the employer, and 1/3 will be contributed by the government. So as I see it, this will only be helping the jobs that needs to be retained by the employer, and it is not designed to save every job. For more information on it, I will be regulating a guide through Steve and on our LinkedIn page as well. It shows calculation scenarios as well, and that would be helpful. Then there are claiming criterias as well. As I mentioned, the eligibility criteria is relaxed, but the scheme is not available to everybody. First, the main hindrance was that employees should have been with you prior to 19th of March, and the payroll must have been submitted in February for you to claim furlough claim for the same employee later. But now the eligibility criteria is relaxed, and the employee needs to be on your payroll on or before 23rd of September. Then self-employment income support scheme has been extended. The second grant will close on 19th of October. It's very much similar to the previous one, but of course the claim has been reduced. The third phase of this self-employment income support scheme is the eligible people will only be able to claim 20%. So it's of course it's quite reduced, but again the eligibility criteria over here is quite tough, which means the sole traders or self-employed people needs to be actively working, or they must have been active and not hibernate, in other words, for the period. VAT deferral, if you remember, the quarter March to June 2020, you were able to defer your payments, and you were able to defer it for a year, so you could pay for this for this quarter in by 31st of March 2021. This has been extended. You could even defer it further. The new date has been extended for another year, which again should help. Will give some breathing space. But remember, this is a liability. The liability means it will stay over there on your balance sheet and will affect your credit applications, of course. Then another one is there was a reduced VAT rates in hospitality and tourism sector. This has been extended as well, and this temporary reduction has been extended to 31st of March 2021. Before, it was only extended for 6 months. Then people who are self-employed, or people who pay their self-employed bill in 2 installments, first payment on account and second payment on account, there is a flexibility available on both payments. First, the announcement was that the first payment on account, which was due by 31st of July, can be deferred up till 31st of January of 2021. But now the second payment of account, which is usually due by 31st of January of the following year, in this case by 31st of January 2021, can be further deferred as well by 6 months. Then last but not least, and this is my favorite one, the loan schemes. We all know bounce back loan scheme is coming to an end in November. Before, the criteria was very relaxed, but now we are hearing from banks that banks are actually requiring further proofs. Before, the criteria was, as we know, this scheme has been abused by many people as well. They've simply used the criteria of giving them a forecasted revenue of 200k and claiming £50,000 as a bounce back loan. But now the banks are inquiring or looking into your annual accounts, looking into when they were submitted, where they were prepared by a regulated chartered accountant. So there are checks and balances. But just to say that the bounce back loan scheme is coming to an end in end of November. The coronavirus business interruption loan scheme has been extended by 1 month as well. So banks are taking application by 30th of November. Another thing is they are more relaxed up till £250,000 application. There is no personal guarantee to be offered by the director, but above 250k you have to give a personal guarantee. The main things that the banks or the brokers are looking for is your forecast, and the whole application needs to be devised around survival plan. Basically, it is not to be used for the expansion of the business, or your application should be to tell the banks how you are going to survive given you receive this money. Also note, this loan scheme, if you've already received a bounce back loan scheme, you can still apply for coronavirus business interruption loan scheme, but the 50k would be deducted. So say, for example, you're applying for £250,000, they will take into consideration that you've applied for 50,000 and received it, and they will only process the application if successful for 200k. Another thing is that there is very interesting statistic on it. I have read that almost 35% of the applications have been approved. So success rate is quite good as compared to what it was when it was first announced, where it was reported in the media that only 4 or 5% of the businesses were approved for the CBIL application. Let me just check if there is any point I'm missing. Yes, and then another one is Future Fund, the government's investment scheme for innovation and fast-growing businesses. I do not personally, I have not worked on it, but I know this scheme is available. So if you are in the tech business, you're developing app, or you're doing innovation, government does know in these sectors. First few years are where you only input, you expense, and the revenue starts starts later on. So so there are many businesses that we look after as well, whom we do the research and development, tax credits, etc., who've been there and doing the raising the capital or funds equity through the dilution, issue of new shares, SCIS, EI schemes, angel investors. These are the businesses which show very minimum or no sale because the product is still under development and through the testing, but the support is available.
Zaib, you've frozen there. That was really helpful, and Zaib was coming to the end of that. Okay, Peter Collins is back. So Peter, can I unmute you and ask you to ask your question? Yeah.
Jolly good. Sorry about that. Come for the break. Or too much information. Right, am I the token northerner here?
Don't know, Peter.
Okay. Right. This is to Reggie, and I was impressed with your presentation. Quite a challenge that you've had to undertake there. Now, the interesting thing is, for me, from a social aspect, there's two important parts for me. One is the gym, and the other is the pub. I run a pub quiz. Now, I live in Cheshire. Now, Cheshire is on the high level, so the pub has gone, realistically. But the gym, they've done a superb job, right? And they've reduced the machines by about a half. They've taped off every single machine, so there's a good spread of space. You're limited, you have to book to get in, right? You can only book 55-minute sessions each time. They've got close to each machine, there's a squirty bottle for the equipment. Then there's a hand sanitizer because nobody's cleaning the bottles. So you squirt the machine, clean your hands with a sanitizer, get the paper, clean everything. And it's brilliant. It really is. It's very, very good. Now, I was amazed when we had the latest discussions that they were interviewing the gym owner in a gym, and all the machines were right next to each other. There was no tape at all. You couldn't see any squirty bottles. And it just seems as if it's not really been regulated, right? So you've got a bigger task to do there. Are the different universities and colleges left up to themselves to interpret it all, or is it being monitored?
That's a good question. I mean, universities have been working very closely together. So through UUK, which is the, even like an organization which represents all universities, and they've been putting out guidance for universities. So they put information out daily to the sector. So the sector is well informed. So there shouldn't be any reason why they wouldn't be following the same guidance that we are. I think it probably depends on the way that, some will be civic universities, they'll be in city centres. We're obviously in Roehampton, we have lots of open space. If you're a city campus, that's going to be perhaps more challenging in terms of the space you have to facilitate social distancing. Some will have much larger student accommodation blocks, for example, where they'll have much higher concentrations of students, and that's also a challenge. But within the if you like, the teaching space, social space, and the gyms, they should all be following similar guidance on that. So I'm surprised when you say that the gyms that haven't done that. I mean, again, it's just crazy, isn't it? Because they're just
well, my biggest concern is that some problem with those other gyms could cause the closure.
Indeed. Yeah.
In fact, mine now, we're slightly different because it is council run, yeah. Not fully, but there is a council backing there, so things have been monitored. But there's just this huge difference, yeah. And I don't understand how we can get to that sort of situation. But anyway,
I think it's because the guidance isn't particularly clear, so therefore it's open to interpretation, and in some cases it's that makes it challenging for people. So we've taken wherever we've had guidance, we've always taken a slightly more, we've gone to the, if you like, the more extreme end, and we've been more cautious and done more than the guidance has required.
I'm just pleased that we're back at the gym.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you, Reggie. Zaib, you're back online now. Had you finished updating us?
Yes, I was. I had, of course, I had. I was just going to say that we are putting together this guide, which I was proofreading during our meeting. And we should add some images and links to the government sites. And we'll be sending it to you by closure of tomorrow or maximum Friday. So you can share it on your social media accounts with everybody.
All right. Lovely. Thank you very much. So we don't have any questions. I'm going to bring the meeting to a close and just go to our speakers for any final remarks. Reggie, did you want to make any final remarks before we go?
No, just to thank the other speakers, because it's always very interesting to hear how other people are experiencing this particular challenge. And of course, you know, just what's in some sense reassuring is some of the commonality that there is there between what the other speakers described. But there's also, I think, lessons to be learned from everybody. So again, you know, I would extend that that offer out to, you know, anybody here if they wanted, you know, a particular chat or conversation about some things they're doing. We'd be very happy to support them with that.
That's great, Reggie. We are working with the Roehampton Business School, and you know, I know you're still engaging very much with the community, and there's stuff that we've got planned, and that's a great offer as well. So thank you very much. Martin, any last remarks?
Well, yes, I would echo that. I would agree with that. And you know, we're part of a regulatory body. We are a heavily regulated industry, and so we not only do we have to stick to the government rules, and we have to stick to the regulatory bodies rules too. So we're you know, coming at it from both angles really. But I would also agree with Reggie that actually we've gone far beyond what we need to do. I think the safety of our staff is absolutely paramount, and our customers, to be honest with you. And it's been tough, but you know, we can get through this. And you know, I'd just like to wish everybody, you know, it's a horrible situation for us all, and I do wish everybody the best of luck, and I hope it goes well for you all.
Thank you very much, Martin. And then Paul, over to you. Are there any last remarks you'd like to make?
Only to say that this has been great. And it's been lovely to see so many familiar faces and hear familiar voices. It sort of underscores that we're not in this alone. We're collectively trying to deal with huge uncertainty. And I think, you know, the one guiding principle, if that's not too fancy a word to use, that the team and I have been following since, I mean, frankly, we were challenged by Brexit, and then along came COVID. So, you know, we've been battling for quite some time. The principle is it's never over till it's over. So, you know, hang in there, look for every opportunity, keep going, because if you throw in the towel now, it's over for you as a business. Why do that? Why not just persevere for as long as possible in the hope and the belief that some things will turn up, some things will improve. And so, you know, that can be far too cheesy for some people, I know, but that's what we're doing at Le Bureau.
Thank you very much, Paul. With that, I think I'm going to end the meeting. Thank you, Zaid, for the updates. Thank you all for attending, to all our attendees. I don't think there were many questions, really. I think the presentations just gave us so much information, but also a great insight and sometimes a very personal insight into the problems that people are facing. So, you know, we are not alone. And as Paul says, persevere. Yes, Paul.
Steve, just one little addendum. You know, for those of us in businesses that are struggling in financial terms and whatever, the importance of keeping documentation, records to demonstrate that you're doing the right thing, so that if anybody challenges you at any future stage, you can say, in these really uncertain times, this is what I've been doing. This is what the business has been following. We've been acting with integrity.
Thank you, Paul. That's an extremely important point, but also extremely difficult when you furloughed all your staff and everything's down to
Absolutely.
one person. But there has to be a balance, and you're absolutely right. So I think that's about it. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much to our speakers, and we'll see you next week.